not only produce but write most of the hits for all these people on the top 40 over there.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why it's become so generic. Now, it was interesting, this fellow was saying, it's on YouTube as well. This fellow has a tirade, but he's saying there's a difference. Some people are artists, some people are writers. And the writers that haven't made it, right, as an artist, are the ones writing. The artists, right, who aren't that good a writer, are the ones who make it as an artist. Now, all these people like Taylor Swift and say, oh, they write their own songs. It's all bullshit. They might throw a few words in. They've got the producers who write the songs, right? They're the ones who are fulfilling these people's, agendas with their songs and their albums. But they're also the producers. Now, they've had enough industry experience, of course, to do it well. But it's all becoming generic. That's why every pop song now coming out of America sounds the same, because it's the same producers producing everything. I think it was something like 10 out of the top 20 songs over there were the same 5 guys that producing it. Yeah. And they're all the award winners and whatever over there, and they just keep churning out the same shit.
The Beatles could be accused of doing the same thing back in the day. Yeah. I remember as a kid, every morning, it seems like every morning, getting up and turning the radio on, and there's a new hit song by the Beatles, sometimes 3 or 4 in a week. Well, it seemed that way at least, yeah.
But how good's that, though?
Same producers, same writers.
But how good's that, though? The one band, all writing the stuff and playing it as well.
Exactly, that's my point. Yeah.
That's the difference between what's happening now. The big artists, they don't write their stuff. As people don't realise that. They're not writing their own songs.
Do you remember this, right? There was Countdown. Later there was Rage. In me, when I grew up through the 80s and early 90s sort of thing, there was Countdown on Sundays and Rage, and then MTV was on. This is my memory. And that music was fed to me. So that was my only sort of outlet on who was big.
Exactly, yeah.
And you kind of went, okay, well, that's, where was I going with that thought?
Well, I guess...
Oh, no. Remember when there was like, the 70s are back? Like, you might get to the 80s and then all of a sudden this movement that went for like 18 months when the 70s would come back. And the 80s came back in the 90s, that sort of thing. But the 60s sort of thing... I don't think that'll ever happen again.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, what is the music of the 2000s?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Could you put your finger on that?
I'm a firm believer that everything old is new again sometime. And, I'll give you a close example. Oasis, basically just were a Beatles copy, but were huge in the 90s. Yeah. But because the kids hadn't heard it before, it was new to them. So the same thing's going to happen again. And I think it's really on its way, which I'm really happy about. Yeah. But
with so much media out there, I'm completely lost.
No,
there might be kids over here listening.
Times are so different now because
finding an avenue is hard. Yeah.
You're talking about live music. It's a different thing to media music.
Yeah, but even recorded music, I mean, it's changing too, meeting the times.
Yeah. Media music I don't mind because there's lots of stuff going on. This thing that's been my son, 27-year-old son, feeds me all this stuff coming from Triple J, which I love because he's keeping me up to date, or I love keeping up to date with music. I'm not someone who's sentimental or reminisces too much about the old days. I'm always moving forward with my music and, listening to other people's. And
it's hard, but isn't it?
And he said, there's this thing that's been top of the charts in Triple J for the last 12 months. And I listened to it and thought, shit, I might want to do that song. It was a really cool song. I can't remember the name of the band or anything, but I thought, now that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at that and think it's been top 10 for so long, I think that's why, because it's a good song. It played very well. Modern production, of course, but I think, I can understand that, The whole thing about rap had its little... We were talking about this before, weren't we? Rap had its day, but then it became an amalgamation of several different styles. You started to have chick singers coming on and doing some melody and some vocal, some, lyrical stuff on it. Just because rap got a little tired maybe, So suddenly they started to integrate the melodic side coming in with rap. Not that I don't mind rap, I love the beats behind it. They come up with some really funky, really good, good stuff to, cool stuff to groove to.
You know what I really appreciate? We did a gig at Cooley Hotel on Saturday night, and we were downstairs, simple cover band downstairs. Upstairs was Aussie hip-hop star Illy, okay? And I know one of his songs, and it's a great song. I actually went, I like that guy. He seemed like a normal dude. And he had a full band. How cool's that? You know, I'm showing my age, but there's a lot of these hip hop guys traveling with full bands, real drum kits, and turning that music into a live.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's evolving into organic music.
And they appreciate what looks good. You can't just get up there with a turntable dude and rap. Everyone knows that sucks to watch.
Well, speaking of sons, I've got a crazy, just turned 32-year-old son, actually, who's a mad musician down in Sydney. I'll give him a bit of a plug. G'day, Shawnee. Sean Michael Millar.
Shawnee, how much?
Yeah, with his band Angel Awake and so on. But his true love's always been rap. He used to rap around the coast here back in the days as Hazel Eyes the Devil, if anybody can remember those days. Very dark lyrics and so on. But he's still into rap. But it's more big production, as you say, and he's actually writing his own rap stuff at the moment, but also being in a rock band. So he's got he can play guitar, he writes songs. Yeah. So again, it's a mixture of everything now, which again shows you music's evolving to an organic state as opposed to that computerized generated.
Well, it was only computer generated state because that what was big at the time. Computers. It's like in the 80s when keyboards took over. Everything became keyboard dominant. You know, that whole new world. New wave music.
Electric kits and
Visage and all those German bands that really kind of pushed that whole electronica thing. You know.
How about this movement with the electric drum kit?
There's no movement with an electronic drum kit.
Stand-up style.
But yeah, it's a similar thing. The 80s keyboard led. Then the noughties, as they say, it's all computer led. So where's the next step going to? Who can predict what's going to come? Technology always predicts music. Now you look at the 60s and 70s. That was basically pushed by the electric guitar. Because everything before that was acoustic. So as soon as electric guitar, electric bass, and good PAs, and that started to come about, everybody fell into that style of thing. You look at things like Bob Dylan, who made a name on being a great songwriter back in the 60s. As soon as he come out playing electric, everyone booed him and said, "What the hell is this? We like your acoustic stuff." And he had a beautiful band called The Band that were backing him, who had hits in their own right back then, And so you've got a new surgence of people that are getting into him because he's gone electric, and that the old guard are going, "No, we don't like that. That's electric, we like the acoustic." So you're always going to have your people who like to be stuck in the past, and then people who like, something new and refreshing. And
nostalgia. Drew knows all about nostalgia because he's in a cover band, right, Drew?
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding.
Going back, well, you're right, mate. To be honest, there's 5 of us in our band, right? We all have our favourite songs in our mind. Mm-hmm. When you're in a cover band, you have to chuck all that away because it's all just about what the girls dance to, and if there's girls, there's blokes, right? So that's what you do. You just want to get the ladies dancing all the time. But going back to the magic of, if you play a modern song, a top 40 song, if we learn one of these songs that's massive right now, they generally suck. But if you play something that's, like you were saying before, from the 70s, there's a certain magic, even to the kids. It might have been replayed on a movie or a bit of advertising.
Yeah.
It's like this other era song, and people, it could be that Mustang Sally. We cannot. No one loves to play Mustang Sally, but if we play that song, everyone comes out of the pokey room to dance. You know what I mean?
What about all the stuff that is in advertising now? It's all these 70s songs that sound very similar to a 70s song.
Oh, yeah.
All they got to do is change one chord so they avoid copyright. They don't have to pay royalties for it, and everyone recognises it. So it becomes a generic thing that you put behind an ad.
Yep.
Another 70s song. It's classic. There's so many of them out there.
Hey, we don't want to make this a bitch fest about music. But you know what I'm really interested in is I looked you up on Google, right?
Google.
That's where that's again the internet does some good. And so you were in this band Finch, okay?
Where am I in Google?
Contraband. Oh mate, you're all over it. And I want to know, because back in, that was the mid-70s,
early to mid-70s.
Early to mid-70s. Yeah. So you're in a band with guys I know, Bob Spencer, Mark Evans.
Yeah, Bob Spencer.
I bought a guitar for Mark Evans.
Joined Skyhooks after us, and then the Angels.
Yep.
When he left Finch to join those bands, the bass player left, and Mark Evans came back from AC/DC from England and joined us on bass. And We ended up with a lovely guitarist, Dave Hines, who'd been in a band called Rabbit in down Newcastle. Yeah, and then we were going overseas, but there was an overseas band called Finch at the time, so we had to change the name according to the record company. So it became Contraband. But at that time too, I just found out it was all becoming very generic what we were doing. It lost what we had. We were almost like an avant-garde heavy rock band in the early 70s with Bobby Spencer. Owen Orford, the singer, he's got a huge agency in Sydney. They manage Silverchair and, Cog and a few other things and, Trading Post, I think.
Wow.
I think they're still called Trading Post.
Yeah, I think so.
And so he was the singer in the band. So, that's kind of my... we all started off at school. We were a school band when we first started.
What school?
Well, different schools, but me and the bass player went to St Pat's at Sutherland. Owen he was the older one. He ended up being a teacher in Cronulla High, and Bobby Spencer went to Malabar High. So we're kind of all eastern suburbs boys, all surfers, of course, back then.
Excellent.
And I haven't been for a surf for 10 years, I don't think.
Have you? Oh, you have to, mate. You have to.
It's ridiculous.
Well, not right now. It's about 10 foot.
So we kind of grew up in that environment, the surfy environment.
Were you great straight away? With such big...
We're all musicians, I grew up, I started playing when I was 6. Really. We played, personally, I played in brass bands at school and then, A-grade bands and that, got years later, and then I graduated to Sydney Symp. I was part-time in the Sydney Symp for a while. So my whole background was classic kind of style upbringing.
Really? So percussion or something?
Yeah. Drumming, playing snare drum and percussion in those days. And I think 13, when I hit 13, was my first rock band. Of course, they were all older dudes and had to sneak into the pubs. And, I think I could outdrink most of them by the time I was about 15.
Do you remember the first venue? Do you remember the...
Sandy Point Sports Club, which is out the back of Engadine, between Engadine and Liverpool. There's an old road that ran there.
All right.
Sandy Creek or Sandy Point or something like that.
Excellent.
True. Yeah. And remember the singer guitarist had this old Zephyr, souped up Zephyr, that went 1,000,000 miles per hour to drive us all around and with the tinted windows. And I remember at the back, I couldn't see out the back window one day and I started, scratching it, moved the shit off the window that I couldn't. He turns around, I was scratching his new spray tint that he'd sprayed on the window on this old Zephyr,
Yeah.
And just stuff like that.
Isn't it funny how that, basically guitars, amps and drums are still the same? I mean, I want to ask you, technically what, everyone, if you play in a rock band, you want an old Gibson or a Fender and you want a vintage amp. And, drum kit hardware changes to make things tighten up better and tune up a little nicer. But basically, a lot of years have happened since that time.
Oh, look, I use a Schliessman drum kit, right, which is basically, it's a suspended shell kit. There's nothing bolted to the wood shells. And it's almost like going back 100 years. The old rope tension drums that they used to use, the marching drums and whatever. And that was the whole idea of it, to get rid of this whole new technology thing of cramping the shells. And, I know that for years and years people were trying to dampen down their drums to take out all these wobbles and overtones and whatever to make them, at least recordable so they didn't ring and do all these silly things that, a lot of drums do. And an old friend of mine who was a drummer at St George Leagues Club for about 30 years, he's a great inventor. He'd invented the double bass drum pedal, 2 pedals on the one bass drum. He's just, the guy's remarkable in his thinking. And he came up with this idea of being able to put this rim around the drum to actually bolt the skins to, that nothing actually touched the shells. And it's become revolutionary in how it's taken the market. And a lot of overseas players now using them. Just come back from Tamworth Country
What's
Fest.
his name?
Schliessman, they're called.
Okay, right. Yeah. So that's the man from St George. Okay.
Yeah. And he was telling me a story once. It was funny. He said one day he went to an awards night and he got an award and got recognised for the longest playing member in a club